On behalf of the Archives and History Committee of the First Baptist Church of LaGrange, I'd like to welcome Larry Cousins, retired Army colonel that served his country well over how many years, Larry?
28, a little over 28.
28 years. And he's going to tell us about his war experiences. And as I usually do when I do the interview, I like to ask the person that we're interviewing, for the benefit of those who will see this CD that don't know you, okay, and don't know your background.
Okay.
If we could you just sort of start out by telling us how you got to this world?
Okay.
And
yeah.
a little bit about your education and your growing up, and then we'll get into the military.
Oh, okay. Sure. Okay. Well, my father was a native of Meriwether County. My mother was from Stevens County, up in Decatur, Georgia. I was born in October 15th, 1942, and we lived in LaGrange until I was 6 years old. I actually started school at Harwell Elementary School, and then my father went in the dairy business in Meriwether County, so we moved out to the farm, and that's where I was raised. I had a lot of friends in LaGrange, and when I graduated from high school, I went to North Georgia College in Dahlonega, Georgia, and after 4 years up there, I got my degree and was commissioned in the regular Army. Graduated May 31st, 1964, and 2 days later reported to the 101st Airborne Division in Fort Campbell, Kentucky. I guess we talked a little bit about that, but I was married after 2 tours in Vietnam, and I had 2 boys and our family, and after I retired from the military, I went to West Virginia for 10 years, and then we moved down back to LaGrange, which was always my target to come back, because I still own the farm over in Meriwether County, but we came back in 2002. So we've been back in LaGrange community for 12 years now, and members of First Baptist Church, and so that's a little bit of background on my personal life.
Out of curiosity, were you a member of this church before you went in the service?
Yes, we were. The old church, I can remember going to Sunday school, and I don't remember who the pastor was at that point, but yeah, my family was members of this church.
Well, that's wonderful. I know I've been a member here for over 50 years, most of my adult life, yeah. So it's a great church, as you well know.
Oh, yeah.
I might mention to those that see this tape that you are deacon here and former chairman of the Board of Deacons, and you serve this church well, and you will continue to do so, I know. Yeah. So if you don't mind, and I won't interrupt, I'll try not to interrupt.
Okay, all right.
I'd like for you to maybe review your career in the Army and along the lines of that you started before I interrupted you, of what you did when, and what were the consequences, and what this did or did not do for your life, whether it interrupted your life or whether it was good in your life, or these sort of things,
okay.
If you don't mind.
All right. You might have to prompt me a little bit along, but yeah, basically, like I say, when I was commissioned, we went straight to Fort Campbell, and I was not married at the time, and spent a year up there. Well, during that year, there was a Dominican Republic crisis, and we were on alert during that. And Vietnam was, nobody really even knew it existed. Everything that was going on over there, as far as the United States involvement, was very low key. And in the spring of 1965, they had the Gulf of Tonkin incident. I can remember President Johnson coming on TV one night and talking about the incident that happened in the Gulf of Tonkin. And based on that, they started to escalate the war. So by June of 1965, we already had a few American units over, but the 101st, the brigade I was in, was deployed to Vietnam. Kind of unusual at that point, because what they did was they flew us out to San Francisco, and we went on a ship and we left on July the 7th, and it took 22 days to cross the Pacific. We landed at Cameron Bay, and since there weren't a lot of troops over there, the brigade that I was in, and General Westmoreland had been a former commander of the 101st, he used our brigade as sort of a fire brigade. We went pretty much all over the country if there was a hot spot or hot incident going on. And so that first year, it was interesting. They called it the Platoon Leaders War because it was small units and so forth. A lot of contact, a lot of combat, but nothing really large scale. There was several battles that were large scale and probably well known in Vietnam history, but most of them were small unit actions. I stayed and came back in '66, July of '66, and things began to escalate in Vietnam, and it soon became apparent that the war was going to continue and more units were going to go over. I was at Benning for about, I think about 15, 16 months, and became concerned that I was going to go back as an advisor to the Vietnamese Army, which was something that I did not want to do. I thought if I was going to fight, serve, I wanted to do it with American units. So I volunteered to go back and returned for a second year in late October of '67. And during that tour, I was a company commander, rifle company commander for 7.5 months, and then the battalion logistics officer for the last 4.5 months. Came home, stayed in the service, and was married to my wife, Ray, in 1969, July the 4th. I was going to school and couldn't get any time off, so that was going to be a long weekend. So we got married on that Saturday, and so we had Monday. I had a short vacation, or honeymoon. I don't think she would call it a honeymoon for just those few days, but and then the next 28 years with just multiple assignments. A lot of time of it was airborne at the 82nd and 18th Airborne Corps. Good times. I've thoroughly enjoyed my service in the Army. It was a great life. We had 2 children. Had tours, in West Point, Idaho, Fayetteville, North Carolina at Fort Bragg, Germany, and the last 6 or 7 years when I was a colonel, I was at 18th Airborne Corps, and that was a really interesting and dynamic time for this country because there was Grenada. We went to Panama. I was part of that as far as planning and the execution of it. And then the Desert Shield, Desert Storm happened. Right at I think it was in 1990, 2 years before I got out. And so it was interesting to deploy with a full corps, with divisions, and to the Middle East. And we had done a lot of planning and training over there. So we were not unfamiliar with it. And we had done a lot of preparation. Not directly knowing that it was going to be used for that purpose. But we like with the 24th Division, we ran exercises with them doing ship outload out of the port in Savannah and deployments. And lo and behold, when Desert Shield, Desert Storm started, they had to deploy, and they were able, because of the training we'd done, they were able to outload in less than 3 or 4 days and deploy. So there was a lot of things that happened in between conflicts that determined the outcome with the training and the experience of the soldiers. So one of the things I would pass on that is very interesting to me was the day that the air war started. If you recall, we had about a 3 or 4 month period of waiting time in Saudi Arabia before the actual battle started. And in January of 1991, I think I have my years right here, they started the bombing. But that morning, I had deployed with a friend of mine by helicopter to go up and establish an advanced base for the Corps headquarters. And we got to fly at about 100 feet high the entire length of the forces that were deployed there. And it was the most amazing sight in the world to see hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of tanks and armored vehicles and Bradley fighting vehicles lined up ready to go. And I've never seen a film of that, and I've always regretted that we did not have a film of that, because it was absolutely awesome in going from where I did as a platoon leader in Vietnam up to see that level of a size force. It was really amazing, and showed you the true strength of the United States. And when we came back, we went back after the war. We went to back to Fort Bragg, and then left the service in 1992. And it was a wonderful experience for us, and I would commend military service for any young man or woman.
Well, I think that if the young people that don't have that privilege to serve in the military for a few years in their life are missing a lot.
Right, absolutely. And our country's missing a lot because of that. And anyway.
Let me ask you, if I may, going back to the Vietnam War and how it lasted for so long. And there was a lot of bad PR about it. Mm-hmm. And I'm not pointing the finger at anybody. But then you get to the Gulf War, and bam, bam, it was done, and we were out of there. Right. Can you make any analysis of that or of Vietnam and tell us if what we all heard was exaggerated or if it was pretty much like it was?
No, I think there were, as far as the public reaction, the public feeling, and toward Vietnam, because it was a long war, and because there were a lot of casualties in that war, not just the people who were killed but wounded, the military was like disconnected from the American people and the government, at the time, the people who were serving, at least in the early stages of that war, very patriotic, outstanding, truly great soldiers. They really were the best I have ever seen. I know we always say these are the best soldiers we've ever had, but there's a lot that's a lot of truth to it, because the American soldier is really a wonderful, I don't know how to express it. It's just, they are great. And so at the time, you didn't think about it. You were doing your job. You were serving your country. The soldiers initially were very, very patriotic. I think towards the very end, it had gone on so long, people have become so disenchanted with it that that feeling changed, and they're beginning to feel used and used. I never had that feeling until 15, 20, 25 years later, when some of the declassification of things that were going on at the Department of Army and Department of State, when you realize that, they knew that it was not going to turn out favorably, but yet we continued. And at that point, you start to look back and wonder why and what was the reason for it. But that was something that developed, because for years and years and years I was very defensive of it. And I think it really was a shame that the way the young men and women that served over there, and most of them were men at the time, that the way they were treated, and they became sort of like the scapegoats of a system when they were just trying to do what was right. And there were no support systems. There was no recognition for those people who returned. And I think they felt lost, they felt alone, and had a very difficult time coping because of that, felt that used feeling. Flip over to Desert Shield, Desert Storm. The Army and Department of Defense had developed a much better system of a family support system, so that when the units were gone, the families were looked after. They got information and they got assistance that was not available back in the early and late 60s. And the country, I think, saw more of a reason for supporting, and the war was against something, a real aggression that they had seen. And I can distinctly remember my wife talking about the prayer meetings and the churches and the praying that went on. And I truly think and believe in my heart that, you say, whose side is the Lord on? He was on our side in that one. I mean, it truly helped us and brought us through that as quickly as it happened. Because at the beginning of the war, before the fighting started, we were told there was going to be 15,000 casualties a day, and we were ready for a really all-out World War II scale battles, and we just rolled over them. And I think the Lord's hand was in that, absolutely in that, for that to have happened the way it did, because the Iraqi-Iranian war, same forces fighting, type of forces, several years before we went over, was absolutely brutal. And so that didn't happen with us. We just were victorious in a very short period of time, and almost minimal casualties for us. So I truly believe that the Lord was in that, on our side in that one, and it was providential.
Well, let's hope he stays on our side, because things seem to be going downhill everywhere.
Yep.
Just the morals and the way our society that still has the faith is so criticized, like we're doing something terribly wrong, and it's very sad to me.
Right. Yep. And well, the one thing I'm really proud of our military right now, I have a son who's a lieutenant colonel, and so I'm still, even though I've been out quite a few years, I still have somewhat of a pulse on what's going on. And it's a comfort to me to know that regardless of that, and regardless of where this country seems to be heading, that the military is still just as strong and as faithful and as loyal to this nation as it ever has been. And we can depend on them, and we've certainly used them to death here in the last 10 years or so. I really feel for the families, but this country also was trying very hard to support those families. I just wish more people were involved in serving their country than they are right now.
Well, I agree with you 100%. Well, one other thing.
Yes, sir.
The time you spent in the service, which is you're very much a minority in the groups that we have interviewed as far as the time you spent, because you did make a career. We've only had 3 or 4 of those. Do you think that once you got out, you mentioned a while ago, you still worked in some capacity for about 10 years or so?
Right.
Was this in a field that you were prepared for by being in the military necessarily?
Well, as it turned out, I didn't know that, but I went to, I was one of the few people that went to West Virginia for a job. There's a lot of people who leave in West Virginia to find jobs. And I joined the West Virginia Turnpike. That's what the short name for it is. And I was the deputy general manager, and then the general manager there in Charleston, West Virginia. And it's an 88-mile turnpike, toll road.
I remember it. I've been on it.
And we had about 400 employees, and went up to about 600 in the summer. And it was really like running a battalion almost. And as far as management skills, leadership skills, absolutely. I mean, it was just like, flipping a switch, and everything. I might have been overqualified in a way, because with the planning that you do and the skills that you learn, and that's a joke. I've never been overqualified for anything in my life. But, But no, it was absolutely helped and prepared me, and especially with dealing with people. And you were able to. It was no transition for me whatsoever. And I will say that I really look back so fondly with the time in the military and serving our country, but the people, and it was just. But that was that life, and now I've looked forward to this life. And the other thing I want to say, since this is for First Baptist Church, is I really became strong in the Lord and learned to walk with the Lord. I didn't start off as strong as I should have been, but there's no question in my mind that the Lord has been with me the whole way, and changed me, and everything I've got I owe to Him. And
I think that's a great way for us to sort of come to the end of our conversation, because that's what it's all about.
Right.
That's what it's all about. And if you're missing that, you're missing the main thing in your life.
The only reason we're here.
That's right.
Yeah.
I thank you so much for this interview,
Okay,
and I thank you for serving your country, and I thank you for serving this church, and I thank you for the things that you do that influence lives in this community. It's all very important. And let me say that you'll get a copy of this video, and we'll have a copy in the church library, and a copy with the Archives Committee, and a copy downtown at the museum on Main Street.
Okay.
And I know your family will enjoy watching this, and we thank you for doing it, and we hope you continued success in whatever your endeavors are in the future.
Okay. Well, thank you. And people have helped me, and more than I've ever helped anybody else. I can tell you that, and it's just a joy to be in this church and be around.
It's a two-way street, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Larry Cousins.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
God bless you.
Thank you.